here, and then we will follow. We will pose several questions, and then we will follow with a debate. And you can ask questions to our speakers in the webpage, thereferrolin.com. You will find a small button on one of the sides of the webpage. You can send there your questions, and we will continue after these questions. I will pose to them with your questions to the speakers. As a group, we have decided to organize this more than 1 year after this pandemic. This COVID-19 started more than a year ago. And in this context, more or less 36% of the people have sleeping disorders. Many people are suffering different effects. 32% of the people eating disorders as a result of worry or stress. During the lockdowns, we have seen how the violence against women have rose for like a 30%. And of course, many people lost their jobs, every type of income, and even their homes. However, in this context, not everybody has suffered from the virus. An Oxfam report found that 17 of the top 25 most profitable US corporations, including Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, Facebook, Pfizer, and Visa, were expected to make almost $85 billion more in 2020 than in previous years. And governments across the world have also used the necessary lockdowns as an excuse to crack down social protests. These social protests, whose main public face or opposition to the COVID measures, have been a kind of mixture or collections of conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, and directly Nazis, in the case, for instance, of Germany. Many of us in this time have felt isolated at home and unable to resist either the government or the right-wing corona deniers. In this context, we posed several questions. Who is responsible for the corona crisis? How are the effects of corona related to the more general crisis of capitalism? And how do we find a just way out where vaccines are available to everyone and not just the people and countries with the most money? To answer these questions and other questions we will pose, we have three speakers, as I said at the beginning. The first one is Rob Wallace, author of Evolutionary Epidemiologist with the Agroecology and Rural Economics Research Corps in St. Paul in Minnesota, the United States. He's the author of Big Farms Make Big Flu, translated by Matthews Martin Becker as Was Covid-19 mit der ökologischen Krise, mit dem Raubbau an der Natur und dem Agrobusiness zu tun hat. And also he's the co-author of Dead Epidemiologist on the Origins of COVID-19. Thank you very much, Rob, for accepting the invitation. Secondly, we have also Gizem Fesli, sociologist and deputy chairwoman of Die Linke in Nuremberg, so the party of the left here in Germany. And she is also engaged in the Zero COVID Germany campaign as part of the press team. And also, you have given several interviews on this campaign called Zero COVID here in Germany. Thank you very much also for accepting the invitation to this event.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have also Vitor Guimarães, political scientist and member of the Movimento dos Trabalhadores Sem Teto of Brazil, a homeless workers movement in the national coordination of this movement, and activist of the Povo Sem Medo Fearless People Front. Thank you very much, Vitor, for accepting also the invitation to this event.
Hello, everyone.
So, I have just introduced you very shortly. However, the first question, in this first question, I will ask you to introduce a bit yourselves, but especially not only where are you engaged, which are your activities, but also how is affecting COVID-19 your country, so the United States, Germany, and Brazil. I will start to you, Rob, so I give you the floor.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think introduction was well enough to say hello from St. Paul here. And we only have about 5 minutes to give you a background on our country. So I want to jump right in. Start off with 2 images. One, I gave a talk to Australia, and it was a room full of people there. Only half were wearing masks. That's a very different image, however, from what happened here earlier in the week also, when the Texas Rangers, the baseball team, had a full capacity house at its Arlington Stadium. Only half the population or the audience wore their mask. It's not the same thing, right? Australia doesn't have that much COVID at all, if any at all. And here in the United States, we're at 132 million, of the 132 million cases worldwide, 31 million have been reported in the United States. With 556,000 deaths, and COVID-19 still circulates. All the variants that have emerged around the world have been detected here in the United States. We only have 40% of the population that's been vaccinated. So those are 2 very different things. One country engaged in the kind of zero COVID strategy right from the start. The other country still is in the United States here, is still very much open season, letting COVID splash all about. Although the national caseload has declined from the winter spike, it still has plateaued above what was our spike in the summer. So there's this weird schizophrenia here, social schizophrenia, in the sense of there's exhaustion from all this, as the moderator began describing. But in addition, there's also a sense that the war is over. We've got the vaccine, and also at the same time, the COVID never actually isn't real either. So all the mix of conspiracy theory, all the kind of collapse of public health, as it were. It's not merely a matter of a failure of Trump going back from the beginning of the year. That's most definitely an issue. But the kind of denialism is actually structural. It's deeply embedded into the history of the country, especially the last 40 years, engaged in the kind of a neoliberalism that either neglected public health or monetized it. So in essence, public health came down to your individual relationship with your doctor. And that's kind of a hard thing to do when you have 28 million Americans without any insurance, even under Obamacare, and 44 million more Americans that are underinsured. Combine those 2 together, and you've got a population that's ill-served that approaches the entire population of Germany. Think about that kind of gap that you have in your country, that if you've rolled off public health as a relationship with a doctor and you can't see the doctor. So the Biden administration is very much better so far. When I say very much, they acknowledge that COVID exists, and their efforts to try to actually distribute the vaccine. But again, the strategy is primarily to get vaccine into arms, and all the things that other countries, including Australia, that began with, that were able to control their outbreaks with non-pharmaceutical interventions, are still not being done. Countries like states, like I described, Texas, all the lockdowns are over, all the mask mandates are over. People can do whatever they want, as if COVID doesn't even exist. And so, we are just relying on a vaccine strategy. So you have 165 million doses that have been given from as of April 4th. But of course, vaccine efficiency and vaccine efficaciousness are 2 different things. You can have an efficacious vaccine, but if you don't have the apparatus or the infrastructure that was needed to distribute the kind of non-pharmaceutical interventions, the contact tracing, sending every household a box of masks. If you don't have that, infrastructure, then it makes things very difficult in terms of distributing the vaccine as well. So we have the kind of disparities that are already present in the United States in really cruel, nasty ways. The racial capitalism are also being expressed in the way the vaccines are being distributed. There are maps of Chicago and New York City showing neighborhoods that are primarily Black and brown and poor. Although they have the greatest number of deaths from COVID-19, have by far fewer number of vaccinations. These are all emblematic of what's called the Tudor-Hart's inverse care law, which in effect says that the availability of good medical care tends to vary inversely with the need for it in the population. So very much pathogens and outbreaks are something of a mirror for countries in terms of what to see and what to look at themselves. I know I'm going to wrap up here, but I do want to say the problem with the Biden administration, it's not merely a matter of that the so-called adults are back in power and that some interventions can be done. It's not about personas. It's not about how, I mean, certainly it is, right? Trump in power, it was a terrible thing. Bolsonaro in power in Brazil is a terrible thing, leading to so many deaths. But it doesn't mean that Biden in power or Angela Merkel in power is the solution, in the sense of that it's not merely a matter of persona. It's not merely a matter of adhering to science. There are these structural impositions in which business governance is organized around productivity first at the expense of the public health. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about that in due course. So, but my time is up and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. I have a further question to you, very, very short. Does it exist in the United States? Because you told us in Texas the situation is different, or is so in this way. Does it exist any kind of coordination of the different between the different states, kind of common strategy? Because this is a very important topic here in Germany, or also where I come from Spain. This is a very important thing. Does it exist, something similar in United States?
Well, we had to call ourselves the United States of America because we weren't united. So all from the very beginning, the states were very much opposed to each other. We went to civil war over these things. There's a lot of power that's spun off to the states themselves. They, in essence, have set the standards in terms of practices. The federal government under Trump basically washed its hands of all these things. Many of the states are, in essence, governed by denialists, even to the point that you have people on their deathbeds declaring that this can't be COVID. So a failure of leadership. So to answer your question, there is much of the work has been spun to the states that are not in position to engage in the kind of intervention that a pandemic requires. It requires a federalist intervention. It requires organization across states. COVID-19 doesn't care about your state line or your province border. Very much crosses it, and so that kind of organization not only extends within a country, but across countries, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that as well.
Thank you, Rob. Now I'm going to come to Germany, so I give the floor to Gizem Fesli to talk about this initiative, Zero COVID, and also the situation in Germany. Gizem, can you hear us? I see the connection has fallen. So meanwhile, while she comes back, maybe I give the floor to Vitor. So we move to Brazil. Already Rob mentioned Bolsonaro. I think Bolsonaro was one maybe of the main, I don't know, more controversial. Just I'm being very kind with him, okay? Person during this pandemic. So please, Vitor, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Rob and Gizem. It's very good for us. It's an honor to be here in this debate with Link International. I had the honor to go to Berlin just a week after Bolsonaro won here the elections, so that we could debate a bit about what was going to happen in Brazil. And at that time, we were looking forward to all the disaster that the extreme right would give to Brazil, but the pandemic just made everything worse. I'd like to give you some numbers. First, the hunger numbers in Brazil. Jaime mentioned that 35% of people are having food disturbs, but in Brazil, we had this survey that was published last week. Numbers of the end of 2020, December, half of the population in Brazil can't eat properly. 55% of Brazil's population can't eat properly. 99% of our population, 19 million people, are in severe food insecurity. That's our situation. We are like, everything is very bad because Bolsonaro, he came and said something like, well, or we are going to save lives or we're going to save the economy. So, and then he made things in a way that people are dying. People are dying because of the virus. People are dying because they're being shot, and people are dying because they don't have jobs and they can't even buy food. So for you to see, last year they created this emergency fee, emergency allowance. It was 600 reais to 66 million people. And it was for 5 months, and then they cut it in half. And then in the end of the year, they just took it off. And in August, when they took it off, like immediately, 18 million people went on extreme poverty in Brazil. We are facing a situation here that people are in desperate because we are facing the health collapse, not only the public, but the private system also. I live in Rio de Janeiro. Here we are in the worst situation. We have all the beds for COVID. We're having like 97% of occupation, and like people are dying on the corridors. It's horrible. People, we really don't know. We go on our social media and it's like an obituary. Like every day, people are dying. People are dying. It's horrible. For you to see, they made this study about the favelas. 71% of the favelas livers, people who live in favela, lost half of their income because of the pandemic. 70%, like almost the same, don't have enough money to buy food. That's it. I wanted to come here and just say that Bolsonaro is the worst pandemic manager, and that our public system, SUS, was like a model for the world. We had one of the biggest capacities of immunization because of vaccines, but really we are facing like 80s problems. We're facing problems that shouldn't exist in the 21st century. People are really struggling for eating something. And as the economics are going down, and we have the biggest amount of unemployment since the beginning of the century, since the 2000, since we came to the 2000, like everybody's is desperate. I'm here to talk this image to you that we are desperate. And as we are this miserable country, as we have lots of extreme poverty people, we increased the amount of billionaires in Brazil. The year of 2020 ended with these numbers I told you, 19 million people who are in severe food insecurity, and 20 new billionaires enter in the Forbes list. That's like, we really don't know how to react. We are going to talk about it later, but I wanted to give you this image. As you asked, Rob, we have a coordination in Brazil, but it's a genocide coordination in Brazil. Actually, we are telling here that now genocide is a verb. It's true genocide, because black people are getting are being killed, indigenous people are getting killed, homeless people are losing their houses, people are losing their jobs, and we don't have even food to put in tables. The situation in Brazil is horrible. I will end with one last number that just came today. in Rio de Janeiro, the second biggest and richer, wealthier city in Brazil, only in the year of 2021, 10 people got shot inside their houses, mostly in police operations. So that's it. If you live in Brazil and you are not one of these great billionaires, or if you are not of Bolsonaro's family, you may die getting shot inside of your house. You may not be able, you have 50% of chance of not being able to buy food. And if you get the COVID, you won't get treatment. That's the situation in Brazil. We are desperate, and it's very, very important to have an event like this so that we can tell it to the world. Everybody knows how and what Bolsonaro is doing, but living with Bolsonaro's government is horrible. He needs to get out. We need an impeachment. We need international forces to pressure Brazil and Brazil's authorities to take him off, because just with vaccine, with emergency allowance and lockdown, we may be able to put things a bit down. Yesterday, Professor Miguel Nicoleles and in a study of Washington University, the IHME, they told that Brazil may have, by the 1st of July, 562,000 deaths. And that means that in the month of April, more people are going to be dying in Brazil than getting birth. So, like, we are desperate, and it's very, very important for us to debate here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor, for this terrible picture, actually. We will go more in depth on not only the problems, but also the solutions afterwards. Now I'm going to give the floor to Gizem. I think your connection is back. You are part, as I said at the beginning, of the platform Zero COVID. So maybe you can explain what this campaign is, also how is the situation in Germany.
So hello to everyone from me as well, and thank you one more time for letting us be here. So first of all, I can probably say that I am totally with Rob and Vitor, and I can just underline what they have already been saying. And just to look at the numbers in Germany and to give you a quick overview on the numbers and cases of the coronavirus. So we have approximately around 2.9 million cases here, active cases, 2.6 million people have already recovered, thankfully, from the coronavirus, but unfortunately, almost 80,000 people have already died. To be exact, it's around 77,000 people who have died from corona already here. And I think lots of people have already heard that the biggest struggle Germany has right now is the fact that we are dealing with a huge mismanagement when it comes to distributing the vaccine to basically the entire country. So it has already been said that I'm a part of the campaign that is called Zero COVID. We not only exist in Germany, there's also groups who run the campaign in, for example, Great Britain, also in Switzerland, and as well as in Austria, in Spain, for example. So different parts of the world have come up with this or have joined the campaign Zero COVID. And if you Google Zero COVID, you will find the campaign right away. So what do we do? When did we come into existence? And what are we aiming for? So first of all, the campaign was released or established at the beginning of this year in January 2021. And our aim is basically zero infections. And we especially want to fight the pandemic, not only in Germany, not only in Europe, but internationally and all over the world, because as Rob has already pointed out, the virus doesn't care at all about borders. And our focus is Europe, of course, as people who work in Germany, Switzerland, Spain, Great Britain, etc. Well, Great Britain not anymore really, but the focus is on Europe and on a European strategy on fighting the situation all around the coronavirus in a way in which we can all help each other. So solidarity is an important focus here. And why did we establish the campaign? So we have basically seen that after approximately 9 months and almost a year of basically mismanagement here in Germany, but also in Europe in terms of the pandemic, we were in a highly critical situation and we wanted to basically change things all across Europe. We've seen that thousands of people have died every single day, and the coronavirus is still spreading. There's mutations, for example, from Brazil, that really cause a danger to the vaccines that already exist. And we wanted to come up with a campaign that shows an alternative, also an alternative from the left, an anti-capitalist alternative that fights the mismanagement here in Germany and in Europe. So our strategy is to not follow the strategy of the German government or the European government, but to rather flatten the curve until about 0 infections. So we're not aiming to flatten the curve until about 200 or 50 or 25 infections, but the aim is, as for example in New Zealand or Israel or Australia, as it was pointed out already, the aim is 0 infections. And we also know at the same time that 0 is a number that's hard to reach, but the aim is just to go towards the number 0. So in order to fight the pandemic effectively, the campaign Zero COVID has come up with 5 necessary measures that give an alternative point of view to the capitalist way of fighting the pandemic that is not working, as we have been seeing for a whole year right now. And I can quickly explain and name those 5 necessary measures and then go deeper into them a little later. So one of our measures is to get down to 0, but let's not do that just from a national point of view, but from a European and from an international point of view. So let's fight the pandemic collectively. One. The second aim is to leave no one behind. It doesn't matter if it's homeless people in Brazil, in the US or in Germany, or if it's, for example, people who have fled their countries and who have to live in devastating situations right now at the border of, for example, Europe. But the aim is to really leave no one behind and to help everyone get through this crisis, through this global crisis and pandemic. The third aim is to basically, as I think Rob and Vitor have already pointed out, to support the social infrastructure in terms of the health system. So I think the US is even worse than Germany here, but there's lots of people who cannot find support from the health system because the health system, at least in Germany, and I think also in the US, as has been pointed out, has seen lots of privatization, which is a huge problem that we're facing right now. And fourth, we want the vaccines to be distributed globally. this is pretty easy, I think. And last but not least, we want to finance this pandemic and everyone basically from a solidarity point of view. So this basically goes with point number 3. We want to fight this global pandemic all together and in a way that we hopefully we'll never ever have to see pandemics like this one ever again.
Thank you very much, Gizem. I remind that people can post their questions in the webpage where this event is live streamed. There is a button on the right side. And also, if you refresh now the screens, the page, you can see below under the streaming several links to Rob's books and also to the Zero COVID website. I'm continuing now with the questions to you now, Rob. The scientific community has not still, let's say, agreed on which are the causes of the COVID-19 pandemic, how the virus sprang to the population, or what's the origin of the virus. Which are the main theories currently, and what is your opinion about them?
Well, it's just about impossible to talk about this in 5 minutes, but I'm going to give it a go. Just 2 of them. Basically, one, there's what's called the field hypothesis, in that COVID-19 spilled out over from bats, who are the primary reservoir for the coronaviruses, the SARS-like coronaviruses, and all likely spilled over into some wild food animals or some more traditional livestock, and then into perhaps the labor that raised those animals before circulating among humans for a much longer time than people think. So it wasn't just merely emerging out of Wuhan. It probably circulated, at least the genomics indicate, circulated for as long as several years before it made its way to Wuhan. That's the field hypothesis. I'll describe more about that in a second. Then you have the lab leak hypothesis, that indeed spilled over from a Wuhan virology lab, and that the original virus was sampled from some guano miners in Yunnan in 2012 who got sick from something that sounds very similar to COVID-19. The issue, of course, is that it's 2 hypotheses, but it doesn't mean there are 2 positions, because you have the more conspiratorialists. You have the xenophobic folk here in the U.S. who oppose China and wants to stick China with the bill, as it were, in terms of blaming them for this. And it's a way that Trump wanted to wash his hands of responsibilities of not being able to do anything in the United States by blaming China for a lab leak. On the other hand, there has been a large cry over the last several decades over the spread of these new BSL 3 and 4 labs, biosafety labs that emerged since 9/11, and the first celebrity virus, H5N1, that's the avian influenza that emerged in China. So countries around the world are building these labs, ostensibly to study and try to come up ways to stop the virus, but also that increases the likelihood that you will have these lab leaks. So a rare event that has a near infinite opportunity bends toward inevitability. So there's an increasing likelihood that such lab leaks occur. I'm a proponent of the field hypothesis. I do think that China and countries around the world are engaged in the kind of capitalist expropriation into the landscape in a way that increases the interface between wildlife reservoirs remaining their diseases, not just the coronaviruses, but the Ebola viruses, in such a way that the spillover from these reservoirs increases in terms of their rate and in terms of the diversity of pathogens that spill over. So my take on it is an issue of land use, and capitalists are trying to grab the last of the so-called virgin farmland across the world not just in China. They went through their BRICS version of capitalist accumulation and development. But we have, for instance, H1N1 emerge. That's the 2009 swine flu that went pandemic, emerged. Our group called it the NAFTA flu after the North American Free Trade Agreement. Once that agreement was signed in, the U.S. meat companies flooded the domestic market of Mexico, destroying the kind of way they raised pigs there in such a way that they ended up having to do raising pigs the way the U.S. did. That led to the emergence of this hog swine. So it's not just China, it's in the U.S., it's in Brazil, it's in Africa. Around the world, capitalists are in essence changing land use in a way that leads to these pathogens from emerging. That said, it doesn't mean that the lab leak hypothesis is incorrect. And the objective then must be to investigate to see which one occurred. WHO, and I'll wrap up with this point, the World Health Organization sent a team to investigate. The team actually included US scientists who were working with the Wuhan labs that were accused of being the source of the lab leak. So in other words, the World Health Organization report that came out of that has almost little scientific credibility, and it's been rejected not only by scientists around the world, but by the WHO itself. So the head of WHO rejected that. So in other words, the two hypotheses are still in play, but I think they both represent an attempt to ultimately there are efforts to blame local smallholders and indigenous groups for the emergence or the spillover event. The lab leak is basically, directs attention away from the capitalist land use. And I think in the end, they're both, for the most part, proponents of both of those hypotheses are missing the key, which is that you have the capitalist expropriation that's driving this. So we can speak about the cause of the outbreak of virus. We can speak about the causes of the outbreak. This is land use changes that are happening. But the third piece is missing, the causes of the causes of the causes. And that is capitalist land use that is destroying biodiversity, that tends to marginalize these dangerous infections from emerging and spilling over. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Rob, for this. I think you have summarized very well the discussion and the possible answers. Just a very short question. Do you think we will find, or the scientific community will find a final answer to it, or if everything is related to the how we produce and the produce system and the capitalist system, maybe the final answer or the complete picture or the complete answer won't be found. There'll be a kind of shadow.
Well, as a scientist, I'm curious and I want to know the answer, and it will tell us something about the nature of things. Both those things are in play. There's evidence that there are lab leaks happening all the time. There's evidence that capitalist land use is leading to spillover. Tracking down this specific one for SARS-2 kind of misses the point. We already know that both those things are happening, so why don't we stop doing them? And I think the effort to try to find the answer for SARS-2 is a way it's a misdirection. It's a way of avoiding the fact that much of the same land use issues led to the spillover of the West African Ebola that went infecting 35,000 people and threatened to go pandemic. It explains why H1N1 emerged in Mexico in 2009, explains Zika in Brazil. I don't think we need to track down exactly the specifics. I'm curious about it, but it's not necessary. In terms of the political economy, we know what's going on. So it's about organizing ourselves in such a way that our primary endeavor as a humanity should be protecting and ourselves and the earth upon which we depend, and not making one billionaire after another. That is not the prime directive of our humanity. I hope it's not. and that if we have any interest in stopping this next pandemic from emerging, whether it's COVID-21, COVID-22, COVID-23, Ebola 22, all those things, then we have to, in essence, unplug out of the sociopathic paradigm that we're in right now, which presumes that Earth is an infinite resource. We can destroy it as we wish, and that those, as long as it's black and brown and poor people that die as a consequence, therefore we can continue to go on doing this. And we need to stop that and make a direct turn and into a different direction. Otherwise, we'll see, in essence, more of these pandemics in the future.
Thanks, Rob. Now you have just talked about the origins of the virus. Now we are going to the how to solve or how should we fight this virus. And I'm going to ask Vitor. The pandemic is more or less clear and it's kind of consensus, as even the World Health Organization has stated that without a global response, we won't defeat the virus. This is not a competition between countries. It has been said the virus doesn't distinguish if there is a border or not. So my question is, in this situation, is the global south getting adequate support in terms of vaccines, for instance, or of medical equipment?
I could give a response here that Rob would use the rest of my 5 minutes to talk us more about the scientific issues, because no, that's just the answer. And even if we had adequate support of the center countries and the central capitalist countries, things would be horrible here. For you to know, yesterday at night, like 11 o'clock in the night, Brazil's Congress, they approved this bill, which says that the enterprises, the companies, may buy vaccines for their employees, and it doesn't matter if the health system has vaccines or not. And for you to see, Pfizer said last week that we are not going to sell vaccines for Brazil enterprises. So that we are like relying on Pfizer's, conscience that the government should buy vaccines. So it's horrible. We have public health system in Brazil that could be vaccinating everybody. But we are in April. Vaccination started all over the world in the end of last year, and I'm seeing here in the internet our last number, people who got the 2 doses, 2.64%. Just 2.64% of people got the 2 doses of vaccines. That's why we are having so many new cases, new variations happening in Brazil. We have 27 states here, and each one has 2 or 3 different vaccines there. And we are having moments that mayors of cities, they're going in the streets with this little box with vaccines, and they're stopping people in the traffic saying, "No, do you want to be vaccinated?" It happened here in Duque de Caxias, a city near Rio, because they are making this populist propaganda that's insane. Because at the same time that they do everything so that people die because of the pandemic, when you have some kind of pressure, they go and say, "No, we are here vaccinating everybody." The same city, Duque de Caxias, here near Rio, they said, "We're going to vaccinate everybody from 60 years to that are older than 60." But they didn't have enough vaccines. So people went to the lines, in the night before, they slept over, and in the next morning, 2% of those people could get vaccinated. It's insane. It's really, really insane. I really don't know how the global south could get better responses. because like I'm in Brazil, and it's very hard. Yesterday, this guy Anthony Fauci from the U.S. I don't know. He talks about COVID in the world, and then he said Brazil needs a lockdown. Yeah, we know, and actually we don't really want that the American government come here and say, look, Brazilians, you should do something like that. And that, like, it's this imperialistic feeling of the US. But we need somebody to stop Bolsonaro. And Bolsonaro, like, he approved the budget, the national budget, a few weeks ago. And in that budget, he took off money from education, money from the health, and he gave it to, I don't know how to say it in English. In Portuguese, you call it amendments, budget amendments, so that every single congressman can make an amendment to the budget so that he put that money on his basis. He increased the amount of that so that the Congress people don't take him off. It's like he's actually buying votes for the Congress to not impeach him, and we really don't know what to do. So I think when Gizem was talking about zero COVID campaign, maybe the five actions should come to Brazil. We need international solidarity so that to isolate Bolsonaro. It's important to Bolsonaro to be isolated, and people come and talk with governors who are willing to change the situation here, and mayors. We have, like Brazil, have 27 states, so we have governors who are willing to change situation. That would be important so that we could break Bolsonaro. We have important technical system. Our FDA here, it's called Anvisa. It's an important agency. They are not doing politics with the vaccine. So people should talk directly with them, and maybe we should do something to have more vaccines here. I don't know. Vaccines shouldn't be a commodity. Vaccines should be a common good. Vaccines, like everybody, Gizem told us about it. Everybody should be vaccinated at first, so that we could like come down the quantity of people and with the disease. And after that, I think the collapse of the system would come, would not be as great as it is. So I don't know if I have talked the 5 minutes, but yes, well, we need some help. We need this international solidarity, but I think the next question, I'm talking about it more, and I'm sending here to Jaime the one link of our campaign. It's in Germany. It's in German. We have this campaign that we are putting solidarity kitchens around the country, because we are like in these kitchens, we distribute masks, we distribute alcohol. We have this project here in the entrance of some favelas. We're putting soap for people to wash their hands, because like these minimum actions can help us from the ground, from the grassroots organizations to face COVID. Because if we wait from the government, we won't do. We're telling here, the Global South is not getting enough help. And in Brazil, not even our government is helping. And if the government, and as the government doesn't do, we are doing ourselves.
Thank you very much, Vitor. You have talked more or less about how the vaccines or the pandemic are being administered in Brazil, but do you think, or how does, for instance, affect to Brazil or to the Global South the fact that the vaccines are patented? so there is not an open access to them. And we saw with Pfizer, for instance, it was like an auction between different countries trying to buy the vaccine, or for instance, AstraZeneca, who said, first, we will send these millions and then the 25%. How is this affecting the fact that the vaccines are patented to the global south?
No. Yeah, that's the greatest problem. For the main reason that we were late in our vaccination process is that Brazil didn't go in the time that it should go to the negotiations. It was like a race. Those who went first with more money got more vaccines. It's horrible. We have like countries, Argentina are vaccinating with the Russian Sputnik V. Chile with other ones, and as Chile is having one of the greatest amounts of vaccinations in South America, they're facing the biggest tax of contamination. As you have the patent, the vaccines patented, it becomes like market. They are a commodity. It's horrible. Because in the case of Brazil, some states get one, other states get other. The national government get other vaccine, and it's going like very tiny amount of vaccines. So that's why we are facing. I don't know if Rob would agree with me, but we are saying here that we have this amount of variations of COVID in Brazil because people are getting vaccinated like this crazy way, and some people get the disease and then they go away and get again and again, and another person got the first doses and then get the disease. It's very strange. This is the main problem. As Rob was saying, we have the problem, we have the cause of the problem, the cause of the cause, and the cause of the cause of the cause. This capitalist way of exploiting our lives and putting all of those as commodities. That's it. Brazil's people lives are commodities. That's horrible to say, but that's the awful truth.
Brazil, people's lives are commodities. It's a very hard sentence, but it's what it is. In hearing at your description of the situation. Now,
just for you to know, yesterday we had this case in Brazil's television where a black woman, she was talking about racism because we have like all of these problems, and she said something like, if you are tired of us complaining, we are tired of living. That's the awful feeling that we have when we are living with Black people, poor people, indigenous people, like people who are dying because we are commodities. That's how.
Thank you, Vitor. I'm coming now to Germany. We have in many countries. I don't know if in Germany, but in many countries in Europe, for instance, this discussion kind of save health, or preserve economy, or what's more important, economy or health. It looks like German big companies or big business has prevented any serious attempts to close down the German industry, for instance. And we saw many outbreaks of the virus in these industries. Do you think that Angela Merkel has lost control on? So the economy is over Angela Merkel.
So that's, I would say, a hard question to answer because yes, the virus for once doesn't respect borders, as we have already stated, but at the same time, just like the US is, Germany is a country in which we find a federal system as a political system. So even if Angela Merkel was to lose her power, there is still different minister presidents, as we call them in Germany, in different federal states, and 16 of them that will rule in their own federal states. And I, for one, am in Bavaria. And for example, talking about the vaccines and different ones from different countries, Söder, the president of Bavaria, he just said today that Bavarian people are going to get vaccinated with the Sputnik shots. So that is going to be quite interesting, because relations between Russia and Germany haven't been quite good during the last couple of years. But I would like to also say that Merkel did, on the one hand, lose control, because there was one day during the last 2 weeks where all the 16 presidents from the federal states, as well as Chancellor Merkel, they got together and they talked during the entire night on what is going to happen in Germany during the Easter break and the Eastern holiday. And they came up with a decision after a break of about 6 hours, and no one knew really what was happening during that conference or during that break that Merkel asked for. So she went into a room, she thought about what was going to happen, and then she came back with a decision that wasn't really talked about with all the 16 presidents from all the 16 federal states. So we did have kind of a loss of control, but not only from Merkel, but from all the minister presidents from the 16 federal states. And that is where you see the positive and the negative aspects of political systems, such as a federal system, as for example, Rob had already pointed out for the US. But what I would like to also focus on is a couple of things that were mentioned already. So for one, someone has mentioned that we need to organize, and campaigns like the campaign Zero COVID, we need to spread these campaigns to all over the world, not only to a couple of countries in Europe, but really to all over the world, especially to Brazil, because the situation there is really endangering everything that other countries such as Israel or New Zealand and Australia have reached so far. So if really the one mutation that was talked about during the last couple of days that is mutating in Brazil, if that one is going to be resistant, then I think we really have, globally speaking, a huge problem in fighting this pandemic. So really, if the countries all over the world don't organize to fight this pandemic altogether, then I really don't know how this pandemic is going to be fought. So this is one aspect I wanted to focus on: organize. Everyone needs to organize, and if Zero COVID sounds interesting to you, then feel free to go to zerocovid.org, and you'll find all the information I'm talking about right now as in English as well as in German and in other languages such as Turkish, for example, or Russian. So we really are trying to fulfill this aim of working and fighting this pandemic in an international way. Then another point I want to focus on is the vaccine and how it has to be distributed globally. I think Vitor has said it already that Brazil apparently has huge problems, just like, for example, different kinds of countries in Africa, to distribute the vaccine. And it doesn't matter, I think, if it's from AstraZeneca or from Pfizer. Everyone just needs the vaccine, and especially people in Germany, because the amount of people that have been receiving 2 shots is, I think, around 4 or 5%. So it's really low compared, for example, to the US only, I'd say. Then coming back to distributing the vaccines and especially the patented ones, which is all of them globally, I think is really important so that we can all fight this pandemic at the end, hopefully, of this year, and that next year and for all the years coming, we don't have to deal with these kind of situations anymore. And I think it really is pretty easy for the entire for all of the countries globally, especially for countries such as either the US or Germany, to distribute the patented vaccines to all over the world if they only wanted. It's people who are not willing to distribute these vaccines globally because of, as we all know, capitalistic point of views, and they basically just want to make more money. But we are paying with the lives of peoples if these vaccines and the patents are not being distributed to all kinds of countries. And states such as, I think, India and South Africa, they have already asked the WHO to, basically distribute all the vaccines to all over the world. And one of the countries leading the answer to, for example, India or South Africa was Germany, in saying, no, we're not going to basically free the patents and distribute the vaccines to all over the world. So I really have to point out here Germany, who is doing a horrible job, both only in this country and especially all over the world, in distributing, for example, what Pfizer has come up with. And this is why the third point of the campaign is really important, to basically make the vaccines, as global commons to everyone, because we can only fight this pandemic all together. And we also know that the money that was used to come up with these vaccines was also taxes. So it's really the people who have paid the scientists to basically come up with a vaccine, and it really should be withdrawn from private profit making and be distributed to all over the world, because it was a creative collaboration of different kinds of scientists with the money of basically the people. So this is a second aspect. And the third one, which is also quite easy, I have been pointing this out, is the financing. So as I said, the vaccines, at least here in Germany, were financed by the people, by tax-paying people, and it really just is also the commons. The vaccines are commons of the people who basically paid for them, and it really is, it's just a catastrophe to see how different kinds of leaders such as Merkel are not giving back what scientists have discovered to the people in order to save their lives.
Thank you, Gizem. You have talked a lot about the vaccines, and I have a further question on this. Do you think there has been also a kind of arrogance from West Europe towards vaccines like Sputnik V? They saying, "Oh, this vaccine the Russians did is not trustful," or even to other countries, Sinopharm from China, but also the one developing in Cuba, Soberana, etc., etc. Do you think there has been an arrogance from Europe, from West Europe towards other countries or to other vaccines?
So the connection was a little bad. I did understand your question, though. If you don't hear me, just let me know and I'll turn off my video really quick. But I would say yes, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was an arrogance here, also in Germany. But I think people have realized, and especially state leaders have realized, that we cannot fight this pandemic nationally. We all have to combine our forces and fight this pandemic in a European or international way. And people, they have been talking about Sputnik a little bit, but I know from countries such as Turkey that they have been vaccinating people with Sputnik for, I think, a couple of months now, if not for half a year. And I think it's also really, really amazing how, for example, I think 2 different vaccines in Cuba are about to be, you know, released, and hopefully they will pass the 3rd round of testing. And then I even think that I read that Cuba would also vaccinate tourists, which is just really amazing compared to how small and nationwide countries such as Germany are thinking, which is really not the way how we're going to solve this pandemic. And this is also why the campaign Zero COVID that says that we cannot leave anyone behind. It doesn't matter whether you're homeless, whether you're you know, living in Germany or in South Africa or at those damn borders, in those camps here in Europe, in Greece, etc. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are. Everyone needs to be vaccinated the same way in order to fight this pandemic. And as long as we don't do that, there will be mutations, dangerous ones that might be resistant to the vaccines. And as long as we don't get the thinking of solving this in a solidary kind of way, I don't think that we will solve the pandemic in the long run, at least unfortunately, probably not the global south. But at the same time, Germany is one of the countries, I would say, maybe I would go as far as in saying that we are doing quite a catastrophic job globally speaking. And yeah, Germany is really right now really, I think, leading, maybe next to Brazil, the #1 country in mismanagement of the pandemic right now.
Thank you, Gizem. We have just already talked a bit about the solutions, but now we are with the last round of questions before we go further with the discussion and the questions the audience already sent, and we have received them. And I will ask them to the speakers later, but let's go with the last round. To Rob, last year we published an interview with you where you reached the following conclusion: a global disease requires a global response. We have talked also about this. Solidarity is the order of the day. Internationalism must sweep away globalization. Could you explain a little more how this analysis applies to COVID-19?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the mistakes that many scientists make is that they, one of the ways in which scientists conduct their work is that you don't want to confuse what you wish the world would be with how the world actually is. And as a rule of thumb, that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to confuse those things. But at the same time here's an excellent example in which we've all discussed this, in which justice and good science are together, and they have to be together in order for any of this to work. In the early days of the outbreak, there were attempts by rightist governments, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Boris Johnson in Great Britain, Trump in the United States, the notion that you can just let the virus go, that as more people that are naturally infected, then we'll merge towards something called herd immunity, and that the population would be protecting itself. Obviously, that's absurd because you leave millions of people dead along the way, and 2, herd immunity is not a guarantee. But what happens, though, is that once you let the virus circulate about, increases the likelihood that the pathogens, the virus itself, will evolve toward ways by which it can get out from underneath, evolve these new variants in a way that can get out from underneath the immune system, whatever herd immunity that naturally emerges, and also the vaccines as well, as has been described. So already, it seems like the P1 variant in Brazil is somewhat partially escapes out from underneath the Pfizer vaccine. We have the B1351 variant in South Africa, which apparently has evolved out from underneath the AstraZeneca vaccine. So this is happening in real time in such a way that if we don't get the vaccine into people's arms around the world, then it increases the likelihood that those pathogens that are circulating are going to be able to figure out to evolve out from underneath. So there's two things going on. I think one, the left has always had a strong position on that the latest medical innovations be made available to everybody. It's not just a matter of justice, which is very important. It should be a matter of justice for sure. But in addition, it's a matter of epidemiological intervention. Because of the nature of infectious diseases, they go from person to person and population to population. The health and welfare of people around the world are integrated in such a way, especially now that given the global travel network, in such a way that we must see the welfare of our sisters and brothers on the other side of the world as being foundationally integrated to the welfare of ourselves and wherever we may be. So unfortunately, governance is organized completely in the other direction. I mean, in fact, you see a kind of decline in the notions of shared governance, not only across countries, but even within countries. And the thing I got from our conversation is that all the countries are in some ways devolving toward their states because of the failure of federal responses in the three countries that we've talked about today. So, Jonas Salk, he was the inventor of the polio vaccine. He was a professor at the City College of New York, a working class campus in New York City. I got my degree there. And he said, he was asked why he did not patent the polio vaccine. And he said it'd be equivalent to trying to patent the sun. And his point, of course, was that there are things that require so fundamental to our notion of shared humanity that we must excise any attempt to patent and to shove away something that is clearly necessary global commons. And so, it was brought up and directly correct. I mean, almost all scientific R&D is funded by working people around the world through taxes and such. And the notion that you hand it over to these companies who now have to be wooed and bought in order to bring any vaccines in the first place. Brazil provided populations upon which some of these countries tested their vaccines. So they tested some of the vaccines in Brazil, and then now Brazil doesn't have access to them. So there are all sorts of violations of justice up and down the line, all sorts of violation of any notion of scientific ethics. And so my view is we have two jobs. One, we need to force governments around the world to do the right thing. And that includes the kind of solidarity that was asked for. Vitor talked about isolating Bolsonaro. We should do that for the Brazilian people, but we should do that for the entirety of the world, because we can't have leaders that allow pathogens to circulate and evolve out from underneath our capacity to control them. And to do so as an act of solidarity, and not as was described with Anthony Fauci, a demand from on high from the U.S. Right? So that's two different things. The second thing, though, is that because of the failure of governance, we have to begin to look at each other as the means and mechanisms by which new ideas and ways of doing things emerge. Because frankly, states around the world, they have a class character. And in essence, governance is organized around capitalist productivity and accumulation. And that power needs to be broken because in essence, it's sociopathic. It's not just the pandemic, but we see with climate change, an attempt to, in essence, allow monsters to emerge that will destroy the humanity, that will drive our species extinct. And, you know, up until now, the global north got away with basically treating the global south as both its refrigerator and its toilet, and left millions of people dead a year along the equator there. And then all of a sudden, it's all got concerned about a lot of these issues in the last couple of years, because the damage that that relationship produces has now produced what the philosophers call as hyperobjects, where you have problems everywhere all at once all the time. And so that's what a pandemic represents, and that's what climate change represents. So now the global north is reaping what it sowed, and in destroying the global south, we end up destroying the planet. And so moving forward, we have to engage in what's called disalienation, meaning we have to move away from the kind of alienation of land and labor that capitalism represents. We have to return humanity back into the ecology that it has never left, but we now have to treat the land and people upon which we all depend as being foundationally integrated with the totality of human existence. We have to, in essence, end the disparity between development in the global north and global south, because that disparity has led to the emergence of these problems that threaten the entirety of Earth and humanity. And we have to, and that in part and parcel goes hand in glove with the kind of decolonization that's necessary as well. So that's within countries, between countries, and between the global north and global south. So that's why, you know, the farmer brought up to me, she said that it's going to take internationalization to stop globalization, and the scale of operations necessary to push back an effort to turn Earth into Mars, you know, a dust bowl, is going to require the kind of solidarity of people working together from one end of the Earth to the other to push back against these sociopaths and set up systems in which the well-being of the people and the non-human landscape upon which we depend can continue, so that we can survive and do well.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going now with Vitor. Brazil has the problems you have already described, the COVID, the number of COVID cases, the situation, the economical and social situation, and also a very repressive government, Bolsonaro government. How are people reacting? And I wanted to introduce here the first question from the audience, from Merabi Ketskoshvili. What are the chances of Bolsonaro to be defeated in the elections? Who is the favorite, if Lula or someone else? So I merged also this question from the audience because I think it fits very well with the other one.
Right. Well, Bolsonaro, he's not just an authoritarian, populist, rightist governor. I don't know if you understand the idea of militias. They are something like Italian mafias, but they are like more integrated with the state system. And they, for example, I live in Rio de Janeiro. In Rio, that everybody knows because of the beautiful beaches and Christ the Redemptor, 57% of our territory are in control or of militias or of drug dealers. That's it. The second city in Brazil. And Bolsonaro, he was elected because of the militias, the militia system. His son, Flávio Bolsonaro, who's nowadays senator in Brazil's Congress. He was a state Congress here in Rio, and his cabinet was the biggest money laundering for the militias, so that they killed people for money, just like Marielle Franco, that was killed, was paid for being killed, and the money laundering passed inside the state Congress of Rio de Janeiro, and that's the people who went to the presidency. So it's very, very hard for us to struggle daily and to build alternatives. Defeating Bolsonaro in the elections would be like the first step, but it's not going to be enough, because today, with all the situation we were talking here, 30% of Brazilian people thinks his government is good or excellent. So 30% of our people thinks everything's being good with Bolsonaro, and 46% of people said the Lula and PT, I don't want it in any way. So it's hard for us. At the same time, Lula is the best one to defeat Bolsonaro. For you to see, in I think 2 weeks, he got his politics rights back, and he started to make public declarations and in interviews. He makes a public declaration, and the day after, Bolsonaro changes something in the government. He makes an interview, and then Bolsonaro puts a public campaign for people to vaccinate. So it's like we're saying here, Lula, if you could, you should talk every day so that Bolsonaro would change something he does. That's it. Lula is not like the socialist response we wanted. He won't make an anti-capitalist government. So, like we're speaking here, it should happen. But Lula, he gave an interview to Der Spiegel in Germany, to New York Times in the US, to some of the journals in China, and in these interviews he said, call the G20 and transform the vaccine in a common good for everybody. So like Lula is stating something like that. It's very important for us and for all the other global South. He's an important figure. And today, if things continue like it's happening today, we are going to have the second round between Lula and Bolsonaro, and we're going to have like total strength to defeat Bolsonaro in the elections. But it would not be like enough for defeating what we are calling here the Bolsonarism, because it's happening. It's just occurring like this fundamentalist, evangelic, Christian fundamentalist feeling, denialist, anti-science. These are all parts of the Bolsonarism. But people will look and say, "Whoa, this Brazilian guy is very sad and like not optimistic." But really, we are facing very, very awful situations here. What we are doing, we are working. All the favelas in Brazil, all of them have their own solidarity projects, and we, as a national wild movement, Brazil has 27 states. We are in 11. In the 11 states we are making this public, free and solidarity kitchens, that with the money of these donations, we are giving employees for people. People are working there and getting incomes so that they can cook. We are facing hunger because people are eating, and we are also making this connection with the land producers, because we are buying food from people who wasn't able to sell, or who were selling to these biggest companies and they weren't getting enough money. So we are trying, and we are building these networks of solidarity, which are facing mainly hunger, and we are beginning to create forms of people getting employed again, because it's very important for people to have some job, to have something to do, because as you see, we are telling a lot. Guilherme Boulos, my comrade from MTST, and who some of you may know, he tells many times that people are getting unhoped, and if we don't have hope, we cannot act, and we cannot believe that the change is possible. So we are working to reconnect with people, so that people can have hope again, and we can make these transformations. Because the Bolsonarism, the right populism, the extreme rightist government, they're happening because the individualism and the feeling that the solutions are coming ex machina from outer, but some government is giving, or the prayer is giving. These two combined are making people not believing in collective action, in the union of people, so that we should, our main task here, our main job is to change that, to make people believe again in collectiveness, to make people believe that we ourselves can transform our lives, and that's what will build the path so that we can defeat Bolsonarism. We know it's very hard, but for example, I will end with this. Here in Rio de Janeiro, when we have 2 kitchens working, and we are willing to open more kitchens for you to see, to buy the food, to cook it, to pay people who are cooking, to make the transportation, and to distribute with security, with all health cares, everything. We use something like €6. That would be less than €1. So with €1, we can make this whole process work for one whole plate of food. So if you could help us, as our economic is like very broken, anything you can help would be like very, very, very important for us. And in this debate, I should talk to Linke comrades and to thank, because Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, the foundation Rosa Luxemburg of Die Linke, is one of our greatest supporters here, helping us daily. And I was talking with George, the comrade here. He was talking that MTST is one of the main partners of you. So we are here with fellow comrades, and I would like to thank you for the solidarity you are already giving us, and to ask for us to strengthen these networks. I'll get Rob's contact, I'll get Gizem contact, because it's very important for us to this message and this feeling of collectiveness, solutions to come. So we are trying, of course, without the state, it's not in the scale that we needed, but we are exercising this new way of facing our problems. Bolsonaro should go, and our people should be happy again.
Thank you very much, Vitor. We have talked about the responses of the governments, but also organizations. The last question to Gizem is, if could you explain how people here in Germany can get involved in the initiative Zero COVID? And related to this, I introduce again a question from the public, from Falin Bovier of Toronto in Canada. What do you think that ordinary people can do to try and push for a strategy unlike this incoherent, disorganized, and strategies being pursued by capitalist governments to try and keep people safe and save lives. So this individual responsibility, let's say. So on the one side, how can people get involved in this zero COVID initiative, but also what can we do as individuals?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last question is pretty easy to answer. I don't think we are quite strong as individuals as we are collectively when we organize ourselves. So as we have pointed out already, I think I can speak here for Vitor and Rob that we have to organize ourselves. Otherwise, we just as individuals are not strong enough to fight huge corporations and or states, just governments. So this is one answer. Then the second answer to the first question, what can you do in terms of, for example, the campaign Zero COVID? I would also say just organize yourselves. Go, for example, to zerocovid.org and see what is there in English, for example. I have mentioned already that everything I'm talking about you can find in English on our homepage and in other languages too. So go on the homepage and see what you can download there. We have lots of material just in general for different kinds of work. Then we also at least in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, and I think in New York State, not city, as well as in Great Britain, there is local groups of the Zero COVID campaign that work independently in an autonomous way. So just because I am here from the press team doesn't mean that I know what's going on in a local group, for example, let's say in Berlin or in New York State or in Great Britain. So we do work independently and not in a centralized way. Second, there's different kinds of material. As I said, if you go on zerocovid.org, you will find material for general activism. Then you will also find specific material on, for example, gender problems and care problems also connected to gender. And last but not least, 10th of April, we have the so-called Zero COVID Action Day coming up. What does that mean? What is planned? So we have planned as the Zero COVID campaign on YouTube a demonstration, an online demonstration, and you can look for Zero COVID for our account right now on YouTube, and you can check out what we're going to be doing this Saturday, 10th of April. And there's going to be different kinds of videos that is going to be shown on Saturday. There's different kinds of people who are going to be speaking, people who are part of the campaign, people also who, for example, are not part of the campaign but do support us. So there's different kinds of way in being engaged with the campaign Zero COVID. And then what's also important here is the fact that it's not only scientists, for example, like me as a sociologist who is part of the Zero COVID campaign. What's most important is the fact that Zero COVID was established in the forefront and foremost by people who work in hospitals, by workers, by people who work in the care system, in the care sectors. So it's not scientists like me who have thankfully the opportunity to be in the home office, but it's people who work at the front day to day and who risk their lives. And this is, I think, what is the most important aspect next to the anti-capitalist point of view. It is the workers who are fighting this pandemic every single second while we are talking here right now on the solutions. So that's what's most important on Zero COVID. And this is also going to be the people from the care sector, from the health system, who are going to be talking on Saturday April 10th on Zero COVID Action Day. So feel free one more time to go on either zerocovid.org to check out our material there. You can also download it. Also feel free to, email us if you want anything specific in German. We have people who can prepare things and material in English, or in other languages. Then also feel free to check out our Instagram page. It's also called Zero COVID, or on Twitter, we are also called Zero COVID. So doesn't matter what social media platform you're on, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or just the regular homepage. Type in Zero COVID and you'll find us. And if you want to get in touch, feel free to email the email address that you'll find at zerocovid.org. So this is what I can tell you. Again, check out what we're going to be doing April 10th and join us and come up with your local Zero COVID campaign group and do whatever you want to do. Feel free to do so. We have 5 aims and bullet points that are important to us from a left, anti-capitalist and ecological point of view. And the most important is that the workers get together, organize, and fight this situation, as well as right people, right governments, and right organizations. Just unite.
Thank you very much, Gizem. We go to a further question, in this case to Rob. Or it's a general question, but I address you. The German comrade says, Kate, I think it's, sorry, because I don't remember the name. Nadia from Germany said that the German comrade described what is happening in Germany is mismanagement. And is this an appropriate understanding? Is it just mismanagement, or what are the economic, political interests at play here? And I think this question is not just in Germany, it's a kind of global question, because the global dynamics of capitalism. So I address you, Rob, this question. Do you think it's just mismanagement or the dynamics of the system?
The answer is both, right? And this is what we began with, right? We talked about how, Trump and Bolsonaro and such, when they're involved, they make things worse and they kill millions of people by virtue of not just mismanagement, but direct attack upon BIPOC, Black and Brown, Indigenous people, and an attempt to disparage science is both incompetence and ideology together. At the same time, you have, just merely because we replace these people and put in, it's important to do so to get rid of those people. But in addition, someone's buzzing right now, so give me a second here. But in addition, there's also the issue that when you have people like Angela Merkel or Biden in there, they are in essence confronted with the problem of that it's structural in nature. So just because the adults in the room are put in a place where command and control, which is certainly better than having the freaks and the fascists in there. Hold on. Doesn't mean that everything is copacetic, everything's well, because in the end, Biden is constrained by a governance that's still organized around capitalist productivity. And the notion of, though he did sign off on $1.9 trillion US to help out, it isn't anywhere near what the American people need. I mean, you have people, COVID deaths are intimately related to a failure to, the failure to, you know what, I'm going to have to pause here because I keep getting buzzed. Why don't we return for a second and then I'll be right back. I apologize, but my kid's at the door, so hold on.
Thank you very much, Rob. There were other questions on internationalism as a response to periphery, or a discussion on autarky or internationalism. But I think we are running out of time. Maybe, I don't know if you wanted to conclude with anything, Rob, and then we go to the announcement and the closing statements.
Yeah, I'm sorry I got in on this. Just to say that this is COVID life, you know. It's good that people see what's going on in each other's lives. At least that came out of that. I just want to emphasize that you know, the question of competence and individuals in personas, these are they are important. You know, you have you know, righteous political personalities that in essence are driving through the most horrendous failures of intervention that lead to millions of deaths, and they have to be stopped. But it isn't just merely, you know, trading one business party for another. I mean, this is the issue of that you can have the most soft and cuddly Obama in office and still have a situation where millions are killed. And this is why it's much greater and it's structural in its problem. You know, countries around the world are very different from each other. China, Vietnam, New Zealand, Iceland, they're politically very different from each other. But they made the choice that governance is organized around, in part, helping the people that they ostensibly govern. And then you have more neoliberal to autocratic governments that just let things go to hell. And so in the end, it can't be just merely about persona, and it has to be about the structural aspects that have to be dismantled in such a way that emphasis is placed on the well-being of millions of people. And really, the day-to-day people must get involved in a way. And I think Victor's examples there explaining what's happening in Brazil of trying to get people back in touch with the notion that, and Brazil has a long history of this, of participating in the day-to-day political life that leads to the kind of reemergence of politics that demands and is able to implement changes in the world that not only respond to things like pandemics, but keep pandemics from happening in the first place.
Thank you very much, Rob. I was saying that we are running out of time, so we are going to the announcements and then to the last statement, maybe. And maybe one day we should have a discussion on private life and online meetings, because, yeah. Well, first of all, this streaming is being recorded. So if you connected late, or if you want to share this streaming with your friends, you can. You will see it. It will be available in the webpage soon. Secondly, we have our next meeting on May the 17th, Monday, also on discussing Palestine in Germany. More details are still coming, and you can register again in the webpage, theleftberlin.com. Gizem already announced it, but we wanted to announce this Zero COVID Day this Saturday, the 10th of April, with two actions. Beside these online actions, she described already. We have these two actions in Charité, in Schumannstrasse 2, in Schumannstrasse 2, at 2 p.m., and also at Tempelhofer Feld on the site of Neukölln. And last but not least, if you want more information about the Linke Internationals or about the Left Berlin website, go to www.theleftberlin.com and press to this ask a question and send us your email address so we can send you the newsletter and all the news. So I give you the floor one last time for a last statement. I will start this time with Vitor.
Well, once again, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to apologize because of my English. You know, many months not speaking in English, just here working and everything. So, well, it's very important to happen activities like this. In a few weeks, we are talking with our Puerto Rico comrades, and we know Linke in Berlin has this important campaign to take off the funds of the great owners and to put housing in city for people, and that's it. All, as Rob was saying, we must reconnect and with this solidarity to build ways of working together and facing all of our problems, because if we go back to the causes, all of them are working together. Our problems are not because of the pandemic. The pandemic just made them worse. The housing issue existed, hunger issues existed, education issues, health issues, and the pandemic is making this, it's making it feels bigger, and it really is. But if we face COVID, and if zero COVID comes to victory, as Gizem was saying, all of these networks, these working that people are doing on their cities must happen again and again, because we'll have issues until we transform this society. We're here talking about the solidarity revolution. We're building this movement for a solidarity revolution, and MTST, other movements here, we're talking about it. That's important for us to recollect, to make collectiveness strength again, to make this cheesesteak with Trump. Let's make collectiveness great again, and let's work. People here, I think, put the links for you to see how you can help MTST, and we have this Facebook group in German where we translate things to German to MTST friends. So if you can go there and look for Facebook MTST friends in Germany, and we're here. We're always open for debates, and I'm not inviting anyone to come to Brazil because it's not safe. But when everything passes, it would be great to receive you here, and let's go. I always end when I'm speaking that we may believe we can win, and that's it. We can win.
Thank you very much, Vitor, and thank you for accepting the invitation to this event.